All right, have you ever wondered how scientists come up with brand new theories? I'm not talking about theories from a dusty old textbook, but ones that come straight from, well, real life. How do they actually uncover those hidden patterns in what people do every day? Well, today, we're diving into a really powerful research method that does exactly that. It's called grounded theory. So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll see how this whole approach kind of flips traditional research on its head. Then we'll get into why it's so flexible and powerful. After that, we'll talk about its main goal, finding something called the main concern. We'll also peek at how it all works, and finally, we'll clear up what the name grounded theory actually means, because it can be a little tricky. Okay, let's jump right into our first section. We're talking about building theory from the ground up. And this is where you'll really start to see just how different this is from the kind of research most of us are used to. So imagine you're a researcher. How do you figure out what people are really doing without letting your own biases or preconceived ideas get in the way? Right? That's the million-dollar question. How do you build an explanation that truly comes from them, from their experiences, and not just from what you think is going on? And that right there is where grounded theory comes into play. It's this powerful, really rigorous method for building a theory directly, and I mean directly from the data. It's all about explaining what people are doing and maybe even more importantly, why they're doing it. And here's the big difference, the real game changer. In traditional research, you usually start with a hypothesis, right? An idea you want to test. Well, grounded theory completely flips that script. Instead, you start by just collecting data. You talk to people, you observe things. You don't have a theory you're trying to prove. You're waiting for the patterns, the theory, to bubble up from the data itself. All right, so why is this approach so popular with researchers? Let's get into why this isn't just some niche thing, but a really versatile and serious method that's used all over the place. Okay, there are really three big reasons people love using grounded theory. First off, it's super flexible. You can work with just about anything: interviews, documents, videos, you name it. Second, it's rigorous. This isn't just about, oh, I see a theme here. It has very clear, transparent steps for analyzing everything. And third, and this is huge, it's practical. The theories that come out of it are grounded in real-world problems, which means they can actually be used to make things better, whether in business, healthcare, or policy. Now, we're getting to the absolute core of it all. If you remember one thing about grounded theory, make it this. It's all about finding the main concern. What does that mean? It means figuring out the number one problem that a whole group of people is wrestling with. So yeah, that's the goal right there. It's not just about pointing out a problem. Grounded theory aims to develop a theory that explains two things: what that main concern is and how people are actually dealing with it. It's about the problem and the clever ways people try to solve it. Okay, let's look at a real-world example. A study of adult students taking classes online found their main concern wasn't that the work was too hard. Nope, it was just finding the time to study. And the theory that came out of this explained how they resolved it through a process the researchers called temporal integration. Now that sounds fancy, but it just means all the clever ways they squeeze studying into their packed lives, like listening to a lecture on the bus or studying during a lunch break. It's fascinating because it helps show there were different types of students, like jugglers who managed it well and strugglers who had a harder time. Here's another really powerful example. For nurses dealing with tough ethical choices, the study found their main concern was something called moral distress, and the theory that emerged explained how they coped with it through a process called moral reckoning. It was basically this multi-step journey of facing their tough feelings, rethinking their values, and, finding a way to keep going. And one last one, just to show how widely this can be applied. For teams where people came from totally different fields, say doctors, social workers, and lawyers, their main concern was just delivering good service to their clients. The theory showed they solved this through something called pluralistic dialoguing. Again, a big term, but it just means they developed a special way of talking to each other to bridge their different professional jargons. See the pattern here? There's a core problem, and there's the social process people create to solve it. Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. But what about the how? How does a researcher actually build one of these theories? Let's take a quick peek at that journey of discovery. So the process is kind of like a cycle, or maybe a funnel. It starts off really wide in what's called the inductive phase. You're just open to everything, looking at the data, constantly comparing one piece to another to spot some early patterns. Then you hit this major turning point. You identify the core category. That's the big idea, like moral reckoning. Once you have that, the funnel narrows. The process becomes deductive. You start using that baby theory of yours to guide you, to figure out exactly what new data you need to go out and collect to really flesh it out. All right, we're almost at the end. But before we wrap up, I want to clear up one thing that can be a little confusing. The term grounded theory itself, well, it actually means two different things. So, on one hand, grounded theory refers to the method itself, the whole systematic process, the toolkit you use to do the research. But on the other hand, it also refers to the outcome, the final theory that the method creates. So think of it this way. It's both the recipe and the cake you bake with it. It's the journey and the destination. I love this quote because it just perfectly sums up the whole spirit of this thing. You will not know precisely what you are studying until the core category is identified from your analysis. I mean, think about that. It's all about being open to being surprised. You don't go in knowing the answer. You follow the clues in your data until that big central idea finally clicks into place. And really, that leaves us with a pretty big thought to chew on. In a world that's so full of assumptions, this approach is a powerful reminder to just listen first. And it makes you wonder, right? What other amazing patterns, what other brilliant solutions that people have come up with are just out there waiting to be discovered if we'd only be willing to start from the ground up?